Hey, what's up, everyone? It's the Lemesis, your nemesis, but you can call me Lem. And welcome to Just Another Cheesehead podcast. And today we're going over the 2024 Green Bay Packers NFL draft class and just a general discussion to talk about what's been going on in the draft over the last few days and my thoughts about it. And honestly, I want to also reflect on the draft of other teams, but not just of today, but honestly over time. So let's get started. Remember, I'm here to educate you guys to help you to become better Packer fans. So at times things might rub you the wrong way, but just know there's no pain, then there's no gain. So I'm only helping you get more gain. So the more likely that we disagree on something, the odds are that you're probably wrong and I'm right. And you just need to listen and just embrace the truth because the truth is going to set you free. So let's get started on this draft. So let's welcome ourselves to the 2024 Draft Central of the Green Bay Packers. Slight little applause there. You can't really hear it. But I'm excited. I'm excited about our future. I'm looking forward to it. Um, I don't want to be right about a lot of things I'm going to say today, but I think I am, unfortunately. But let's just get straight to it. So we're going to get into the class that we have today. We had quite a few picks in the draft. Um, and I'm just going to start out with the obvious. We don't know. We don't know how well these guys are going to do. But the first pick of the draft, and one thing I definitely think we do know is that Green Bay is really good at picking offensive linemen. So I feel pretty confident that Jordan Morgan from Arizona, he's the 25th pick in the first round to go into the Green Bay Packers, is going to pan out to be really, really well. I mean, we have a lot of offensive linemen that the Green Bay Packers have picked over the many years, and they've turned out to be really, really great offensive linemen. Clifton, Bulaga, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Myers, they're just Tauscher, they're just incredible. Whether we picked them or we traded for them in free agency or picked them up outside of the draft, we've been really good at picking offensive linemen as a whole. So I feel pretty confident about that. So he was the first pick for the Green Bay Packers at number 25. In the second round, we go for a linebacker, Edrin Cooper from Texas A&M. Again, we don't know. Green Bay's not really particularly good at picking linebackers. I know through our history, we've had some great hits, but on a consistent basis, we're not really good defensively picking. We did get Jair Alexander not too long ago. Of course, we've had Clay Matthews, Nishiki, all that stuff. But man, I don't know. It's been rough on the defensive side. Then we have Javon Bullard in Georgia. He's a safety. He was in the second round, pick number 58. I don't know. Georgia seems like a decent team. I don't even know what like division or conference or whatever they play in because I really don't watch college football. But we picked them up. I'm sure we wanted to replace, our safeties that we just got rid of not too long ago who just went to the Jets. Can't think of his name off the top of my head, but we'll see. Our running back, Marshawn Lloyd from USC. Now, apparently, he was in the third round, pick number 88. It just seems like the stock of running backs has dropped tremendously over the years, mainly because they just kind of split the load between several running backs. It sucks that we lost Aaron Jones. I'm still mad at Brian Gutekunst for that, honestly. And I'm just looking for an opportunity to hate on that dude. If he fails, I'm going to really rip him to shreds when it comes to that with criticism to let him know that I'm not happy about some of the decisions that he's made as a general manager. And to me, that's one of those. I get it. Aaron Jones was probably costing a lot of money. We didn't pay, what's his name, Josh Jacobs that much less in comparison. But Aaron Jones, the biggest ability is availability, and he did fail on that front, especially recently. But we'll see what's going on with Marshawn. If he is the best running back in the game, this would be a great pickup. Then we're going to go right back to defense in round 3, pick number 91. We got Tyrone Hopper from Missouri. Again, we don't know. And we're going to go into the analysis of the individual players by just kind of looking at the sum of all of its parts when you compare it to previous years. Then in round 4, we get pick number 111, safety Evan Williams. I was going to say Smith. Again, I have no idea. He came from Oregon. Oregon's an okay school. Those are the kind of schools to me that when I see Oregon, when I see USC, I see schools that have a lot of money. They win a lot in college, but I don't ever really recall a lot of great players coming from those schools, right? I don't see a lot of Georgia produces, I think, a lot of great players in the NFL. Let's say good players. Great would be considered a Hall of Famer. But USC and Oregon, not so much. Duke, when it comes to NBA basketball, yes, makes a lot of sense. For football, not so much. So pick number 163 in round 5 goes to Jacob Monk out of Duke. Number 169 in round 5 goes to Katan Oladapo. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. He's a safety out of Oregon State. And then we get to round 6, 202, the O-lineman Travis Glover from Georgia State. Then we get to the end where we get to round 7, pick 245. We got some competition for Jordan Love. No, more like Clifford. Michael Pratt from Tulane. And then it looks like the last pick in the draft for the Green Bay Packers was pick number 255 in round 7, Kalen King and Penn State. Now, I know a lot of teams will think of the previous years and they'll think of Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant. And honestly, anything's possible. But the odds are that, the last few picks in the draft, more than likely all the picks in the draft won't really do much of anything. But I want to get very specific on our leader, the head man behind scouting, the general manager, Mr. Brian Gutekunst. And I thought it'd be really fun to just kind of evaluate what he's done with the organization, how long he's been here. It's interesting. He's from North Carolina. I live in North Carolina. So let's just look at his career history. So we don't need to go in as a coach because we're not hiring him for any coaching positions. But as an executive, as a scout, he was on the Kansas City Chiefs in 1998. Then in Green Bay, he was a scout from 99 to 2011. So he was scouting for us, helping us pick players. He was a part of picking Aaron Rodgers, which was great, and a lot of other Jordy Nelson, and I mean he was there for all of them, for Greg Jennings, and he was there for every one of them, which is incredible. Now he's a director of college scouting in 2012 to 2015, and then in 16 and 17 he was a director of player personnel, and then finally in 2018 to today he was a general manager, leading the pack. And we'll figure out really, really quickly in just a few moments, was he better at being just a direct scout or a general manager? I don't know, but I think the data will tell us quite a bit. So if we just go back to 2018, we can see very quickly how well Brian Gutekunst did as a general manager. Now, I'm going to say this just to be upfront, because this is going to be the next point that I make. Most draft classes don't hit. But our draft classes really, really don't hit. And I just want you to know that, this is one of the reasons why I don't really get super excited about the NFL draft, because, I mean, if you just look at a decent sample size of just even in the 2000s, since the 2000s, if you go back to the 90s and, and beyond when football first started, you're going to see a lot of Hall of Famers. The game was drastically different. But when you just look at the 2000s, you're seeing literally on average 1.5 Hall of Famers that are drafted each year. 1.5 to maybe 2. So each draft class produces roughly 1 to 2 Hall of Famers. That's really, really rough. It's really low. It shows the high standard of the NFL. So when I go through this, I mean, clearly this is going to be in my favor, but it's going to point out the fact that what I've been trying to say all along is that, our general manager is not really that good. And I question a lot of his decisions. One of the reasons why I still also do question Jordan Love. I know that there's a lot of people out there who are against that, and they hate me even saying that because they are so excited to see any glimmer of hope since we had last year with Jordan Love. But we'll get into that in just a moment. But let's look at what he's done. So in 18, we got Jair Alexander, which I think was an anomaly. I mean, that was the year before we didn't do so hot. We fell all the way in the draft. and we are able to get Jair Alexander. He was the 18th pick. Then we get Josh Jackson, who's not here anymore. Oren Burks, who's not here anymore. I think it went to the 49ers. Damon Moore, I don't even know who he is. Cole Madison, J.K. Scott, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He did win a Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes, but we didn't pay him. We didn't keep him with Aaron Rodgers when we could have. So we let MVS go, but let's not act like MVS is all that great. I mean, I even went to University of South Florida, so it was cool to see him when I remember when he got drafted. Like, wow, I went to the University of South Florida. That's fantastic. We got MVS. He's a Packer. And he turned out to be good. And to be honest with you, I mean, he's only stopped onto two NFL teams, right? He played with the great Aaron Rodgers, and then he played with the great Patrick Mahomes. So, do we really know his true potential? And he was dropping balls against, the 49ers or in the playoffs last year as well. So, I don't know. And then and if he was that good, you'd think the Chiefs would have kept him, but they let him go as well. But I got a lot of respect and love for Marquez. He did his thing. He's a champion. But are we going to really say that he's a great player that we picked up? Equanimeous St. Brown, I know his brother's great. He just got a big contract on the Detroit Lions. Amon Ra, I'm not sure how you pronounce his first name. But, Equanimeous hasn't really lived up. James Looney, Hunter Bradley, and Kendall Donnerson. Again, I don't know who these guys are. That's really the theme you're going to see when you go through this. Then you got 2019, Rashawn Gary. He's, mid to me. Darnell Savage, he's a decent pickup. So I would say in 2018, for sure, a hit, Jair Alexander, but he can't stay healthy. Rashawn Gary, a B-style player. Darnell Savage, B-plus style player. Elgington Jenkins, he was a great offensive lineman. Yep, we picked him up. Sternberger, nothing. Kingsley Keke, nothing. Kadar Holman, Dexter Williams, and Ty Summers. Again, a bunch of guys that are, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but you're not going to really remember them. They're not making a huge impact. They just kind of fill names. It's kind of like if I threw a couple Packer, history names out, you'd go, yeah, I remember him, but what did he do, right? Like McKenzie. Like, well, you remember Al Harris, right? Because Al Harris got the famous pick against the Seattle Seahawks, won the game for us. But again, he wasn't that great of a player. Nick Barnett, right? Blake Martinez. These are guys who played for us for a long time, but they really didn't do much. And, I'm not here to play Packers trivia. I'm sure there's things that I say that might be wrong here and there because I just got names going in and out of my head. But my whole point is we know these guys who are on the screen, and they're really not all that great. Then let's go to 2020. Now, to me, this is like one of those make or break years because depending on how well Jordan Love does, this draft looks much better than it actually does at the moment. If we're having this conversation in week 6 of last year, and we're seeing how Jordan Love was playing like trash last year at the beginning of the year, this draft is looking terrible. But if Jordan Love turns around and puts on a show and he turns into a Hall of Famer, which I still highly doubt, then this draft looks a little better. But even now, if I just look at Jordan Love objectively, he's 50-50, guys. We have the 7th. We're the 7th seed in the NFC. We barely made it into the playoffs, and we made it into the playoffs with the new rules, mind you. So let's be very clear. We made it into the playoff with the new rules, and then we predictably beat the brakes off the Dallas Cowboys, right? Like, if that was, I feel like any other team, I would have a lot more respect for that kind of performance that he put on, but it's the Dallas Cowboys. It's Mike McCarthy. It was predictable. It made sense to me. And then we saw last year was the year of injuries. There were a ton of guys who kept getting injured left and right, and that's the type of person that I am. I'm going to look at the details. We're not going to just gloss over things. It's just hard to hear when you go, man, there's so many guys that have impacts from year to year, like the year when Matt Castle won like 11 games and they still missed the playoffs with the New England Patriots. I remember those things. I remember all those subtle details. So I'm just not that kind of fan, right? I remember the 2020 bubble in the NBA when LeBron won with the Lakers, but I also remember in 1999 when the Spurs won, when they had a lockout. And we question that championship just as much as we question the 2021. So I look at those details and look what we have here. We got Jordan Love, which I think is, to me, his ceiling is like a little lower than like a Donovan McNabb. I really do think that. I don't think he'll be all that great. The odds of us getting another Hall of Famer or another great to really, really good player, I think is still really low, realistically. Then we got A.J. Dillon, which, you keep him or Jones. I know Jones got the bigger contract, so it makes sense, but it's not like Dillon is the workhorse. Like he wasn't giving us a ton of yards. He was definitely not as productive as Aaron Jones. Joshua DeGuara, Kamal Martin, John Runyon Jr., again, offensive lineman, Jake Hansen, Simon, Vernon Scott, and Jonathan Garvin. Again, a lot of guys you don't really recognize. The draft looks a little bit different if Jordan Love becomes a megastar, but right now it's looking kind of mid. So we're not really getting these fantastic players that, who are household names. Now, I know as Green Bay Packer fans, we go through and we memorize these guys and we know who these guys are, etc. But just because we know who they are doesn't mean that the league knows who they are. And that's what we really want, right? We want great players that the rest of the league knows. Therefore, they're making game plans to help stop these guys when we come into town. But if you just got a bunch of small, no-namer guys, well, then, the team is the sum of its parts. Then we got Eric Stokes, who can't stay healthy. Josh Myers, great offensive lineman. Amari Rogers turned out to be nothing. Royce Newman, Dario Slayton, Shamar Jean-Charles, Cole Van Lanen, Isaiah McDuffie, and Kylan Hill. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Again, that's just like, besides Josh Myers, that was a dud year, 2021. Brian Gutekunst's not looking too good, guys. He's not. Now, these next two draft classes, you kind of have to take a grain of salt because, first off, 2022, they played in 2023. Then the sophomore year is kind of like, you hope the sophomore year they make the big jump. I will even give them a little bit of a stretch to get them that, okay, you're in your 2024 season. Let's see, right? So we got Quay Walker. He's shown to be decent, very emotional. He's talking to a buddy saying like, hey, man, we need some more thugs on the field. We need some more tough dudes on the field, some cats who actually have some grit. I'm tired of seeing soft NFL play. I want to see some guys that get out there and play some tough defense. So we'll see with our new defensive coordinator what he can bring. I do believe that a really great, well-balanced defense can literally neutralize how bad our offense may be. Because I do think that, like, no matter how bad Jordan Love is, unless he's not, of course, unless he's throwing picks and he's fumbling the ball, a great defense can really make up for a lot of sins. So if we can get decent play from Jordan Love, that should be enough. We just saw Brock Purdy go to the Super Bowl, and he was not the reason they were there. So Devontae Wyatt, they talk a lot about him. I heard a lot of Warren Sapp. He was also from Georgia. So we'll see. Christian Watson, not impressed. He can't stay healthy. The best ability is availability. Where are you at? Then Sean Ryan, Romeo Doubs. Again, he gives me that, like, he might be a little less talented than, like, a Donald Driver. That's the vibe I'm getting. I'm not getting Devontae Adams. It doesn't mean they can't develop. I will say, hey, like, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt because these guys are young and they can turn things around. Then you got Zach Tom, Kingsley, and Akbari, Tariq Carpenter, Jonathan Ford, Rasheed Walker, and then Samori Torrey. Again, a lot of guys who just, man, like the best player we have here is potentially Christian Watson. And then Quay Walker, has he really, he's been on the field more. But I'm not impressed by either one. Our first three picks, I'm not impressed by so much. Romeo Doubs, he's okay. He's not great. But again, it just could be he's young, he's learning, but we'll see. And then, of course, you get to the last draft we had in 2023, and this is where it's just like, man, it's a toss-up. They could turn out to be great, but we'll see. Lucas Van Ness, Luke Musgrave, Musgrave had some great catches. I remember from last year, very impressive. Jaden Reed, um, Tucker Kraft, Colby Wooden, Sean Clifford, Tavian Wicks. He had some interesting games. He had some. Carl Brooks, Anders Carlson, Carrington Valentine. I think he was the DB? Yeah. I remember seeing him chirping out there. He was really he was really boisterous. I thought that was funny. Um, Lou Nichols, Anthony Johnson, and Grant Dubois. So, for the most part, you see a heavy theme here. Mid, borderline terrible. A few little sparkles, a few little specks here and there in between. But for the most part, Brian Gutekunst, you really haven't done anything. If you strike gold if Jordan Love, if I'm wrong about Jordan Love, you strike gold with Jordan Love. And honestly, you only really need like one great pick when it comes to the quarterback. That can make up for a lot of sins. But for the most part, you haven't been picking spectacularly. And like I said before, most teams don't. And that's going to lead to the next discussion. I want to kind of go over the power rankings of every NFL draft class in the last 25 years. And I found this article online since 2012, which I think is really, really interesting. And I have some further ones to look at as well. So this one looks at 2011 draft class. And there's some notable players that were drafted in 2011. But again, how many of these guys are going to really make it to the Hall of Fame? We got Cam Newton. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. Von Miller, I guess just because of his championships. I'm not sure of his numbers, but Andy Dalton, he's not a Hall of Famer. Aldon Smith, we got to look at his numbers, but I'm not getting that vibe. A.J. Green, he's a name, but would you consider him a Hall of Famer? Did he produce like Larry Fitzgerald his entire career? Julio Jones, kind of the same thing. He fell off. Do you instantly make him a Hall of Famer? Was he a great player, one of the best wide receivers when he played? Yes. But is that enough to call him a Hall of Famer? I don't know. Maybe. Christian Ponder, I don't even know why he's on this list. Marcel Darius and Blaine Gabbert. So, that's 2011. We're going to skip the 90s. 2002, you had Ed Reed, Julius Peppers, Brian Westbrook, Jeremy Shockey, Bryant McKinney, and Dwight Freeney. Nearly every one of those guys are Hall of Famer. I wouldn't put Jeremy Shockey in. I don't remember who Bryant McKinney is. I can't think of who he is off the top of my head or what team he played for. But Ed Reed, Julius Peppers, Dwight Freeney, Brian Westbrook, incredible class. We're not going to go to 91. 08, Matt Ryan, Joe Flacco, Jared Mayo, Chris Johnson, Jordy Nelson, Deshaun Jackson. As great as Jordy Nelson is he a Hall of Famer? No. And I think the trend that you're going to see here as we go through the rest of this is how many notable names are you finding in each draft class as you go through? Like, you're not finding much. You're not, which tells you that most teams don't hit because these are the players that make that big of a difference on the field. Right? You will have some guys here and there. You could think of the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots in the Super Bowl, the pick at the goal line from Russell Wilson and the corner who was guarding him that nobody remembers, basically. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. So he was a no-namer. He's not a Hall of Famer, but he is a Super Bowl champion. So you do need those guys. But to me, to have the consistent victory, you just look at the most winning QB to play the game, he's a Hall of Famer. He's fantastic. You don't normally see like a Detroit Pistons style team winning every year. When you look at most sports, you always see the stars winning on a consistent basis. You don't get a lot of the Trent Dilfers and the Baltimore Ravens winning, but you can't really even say that because they also had a star-studded defense to win those championships. So then in 2005, you had, of course, my man Aaron Rodgers, Ronnie Brown, DeMarcus Ware, Derek Johnson, Roddy White, Corey Webster, Vincent Jackson, Frank Gore, and Carlos Rogers. So you had some Hall of Famers in there, some great players. And then let's just skip that. 2009, you had Matthew Stafford, which in my opinion, definitely winning the championship with the Rams. Hall of Famer, Clay Matthews, Akeem Nicks, LaShawn McCoy. He's a bum. B.J. Raji and Mike Wallace. Can't stand LaShawn McCoy, man. I really don't. Let's continue on. And then the 2000 draft class, of course, you have Brian Urlacher and Tom Brady, Chad Pennington, Jamal Lewis, and John Abram. And then 2010, you had Sue, definitely Hall of Famer, Jason Pierre-Paul. I mean, he's got a chip. Des Bryant. Again, this is kind of where you get Rob Gronkowski, of course, Jimmy Graham. I would definitely consider those guys Hall of Famers. Des Bryant, no, again, like, he's a big name. You remember him. Marquise Pouncey. I don't know which Pouncey brother that is, whether he was on the Steelers, and I forgot who the other brother was. But, you know, again, to me, those are good players. Do they have the stats to be considered Hall of Famers? Let's be real. There's not many people who probably pay attention to offensive linemen. So, you know, I don't know. I'm not going to front with you. But as you can see, a lot of these names are very recognizable from year to year. And when we went over the draft class in Green Bay, just take your fandom out of this. Go through the names that I went over that Brian Gutekunst has picked since 2018. Are there any household names that really stand out to you besides Jordan Love, who still hasn't proven himself? Be real. So that tells you, like, wow, we got an entire team that's mid. And then I think you also need to pay attention to how good are the Green Bay Packers really? We're the 7th seed in the NFC. Is that saying much? Like, think about that. Look how terrible the NFC was compared to the AFC last year. You had a ton of teams that deserve spots that if we could really trade positions, the Bucs didn't belong in the playoffs. The Green Bay Packers didn't belong in the playoffs. There were a lot of other teams that produced well, won 1 or 2 more games than we did, that probably deserved those spots. If there was truly a proper ranking, Green Bay wouldn't have never made it into the playoffs. That's what I firmly believe. But we'll see. You know, we'll see this next year coming up. And I kind of want to just kind of skip through all of these because this really just shows the same trend of what I'm talking about, that every single year, if you just go throughout the years, you're not seeing a ton of players from year to year that are drafted that are like Hall of Fame worthy, let alone just like really great to good players. You're not seeing that consistently. And I thought this was really, really interesting. Just looking at the Hall of Famers by draft year, this is what goes back to that stat that I brought up about you're seeing like 1.5 guys. Because if you look back, and, you know, I'm just off the cusp, right? I'm not doing any super technical math, but if you just look at the amount of names, you got 4 guys, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys in that year. 1, 1, 3, 4. I mean, this one, 4 and 51, 5, 52. Looks like that's 7. Just kind of quickly scanning. 53. Let's just kind of keep going. You're starting to see it pick up. You see what I'm saying? You're starting to see, like, wow, an average of 5. I would say an average of 4 guys. It's since 1936, right? This started in 1936 to 2007. So you're like, okay, so you're getting into the 60s, and you're like, my gosh, look at this year. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 8 guys in the 67 draft, right? That ended up being Hall of Famers. Now, you might say, you know, these guys, you know, they played during a league that's not as tough. Whatever. I'm not here to debate all of that. I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think that just because a guy played in the 60s, he wasn't good enough to play today. You know, I've already had this conversation in the past before. I find it very foolish. The technology they used back then was nowhere near compared to the technology today. The average person has not evolved into this, like, unique specimen that's beyond human nature. If we had the same technology in the 60s back then, these dudes would have been pumping the iron and doing those things. So to me, we're just seeing the difference between technology advancing, not the athlete, quote unquote, truly getting better. The athlete is maximizing their capabilities because of technology. But, like, you know, if you watch that one TED Talk, The guy talks about the guy who ran the 4-minute mile. He ran it on gravel. He didn't have the shoes we have. So the turf that we run on, the flooring that we have compared to back then, the starting blocks they use, the shoes, all those things are different. So if you gave those guys the same today, they probably perform just as well, if not better in some cases. So it's kind of silly when you have that argument, to be honest with you. And then, of course, rules have changed. So, like, there's a lot of guys who played back in the day who just got killed, literally. I mean, just the heads just knocked off and just wrecked. I mean, especially when it comes to football, and we're not talking about track and field, but when it comes to football, it was just such a much more violent sport, which is why I think it got so much popularity. But as you're seeing, I would say on average 4 great players per draft is what I would say off of the cusp. Just kind of looking at the amount of players that are Hall of Fame status based off the year. Then you kind of see a drop-off, in my opinion, in the 2000s. You see Brian Urlacher in 2000, 3 and 01, LaDainian, Richard Seymour, and Steve Hutchinson. Ed Reed in 2002. 03, Troy Polamalu and DeMarcus Ware. And then 07, Calvin Johnson, Joe Thomas, and Darrelle Revis. Now, granted, of course, we won't. Those guys have to be eligible, 08, 09, 10, 11, 12, and so on. Then, of course, you're going to have 05, Aaron Rodgers. And there's other players that I believe that are still playing that were drafted in 05. He might be the last one left, but then they have to be eligible. So, like, they have to retire, and then they have to wait 5 years, and then they'll get drafted or they'll get selected or inducted into the Hall of Fame. So there's a couple years there where there's players who may not even be eligible yet because their career didn't end yet. So that's why they're not there. So this could potentially change. But what I'm saying is, I kind of mentioned it to my buddy. I really do think you're seeing a shift here that's kind of signaling what's going on in the NFL. I know we had the collective bargaining agreement not too long ago in the 2000s where we shifted drastically how often players practice. And I do think that has a major factor on how well players are able to perform. And you're seeing the shift in philosophy where the load is being spread. So it's going to be interesting to see that, like, maybe we're not going to see as many Hall of Famers moving forward because, for instance, let's look at the running backs. Do you really think we're going to get another Hall of Fame running back? I can't think of any guy right now who probably just became eligible that I'm probably missing talking right now, and I know you're going to get me in the comments. I really don't care. But, like, LaDainian Tomlinson in 2001 was the last one inducted. I don't know who's going to be coming up anytime soon, but it just feels like when it comes to running backs, just because of the position changing alone, we're probably not going to see a lot of Hall of Fame running backs moving forward because the load is spread amongst multiple running backs. So you can't get those retarded numbers that you used to get back in the day. You're not going to get a lot of those Emmitt Smiths. That's not going to happen anymore. I mean, it's been like that for a while. Aaron Jones is not going to be a Hall of Famer. He might be a Packer Hall of Famer, which isn't really saying much. But, you're not going to see guys like that at all. And it's just because they devalued the position. So I wonder if we're just going to see a huge drop-off in Hall of Fame status type players just because the game is played so drastically different. And I think you see the same trend when you just come to this list that I have here, which is the Hall of Famers by the draft round. So I just wanted to pull up all of the 2000s. So I just, put in 20. And then as you can see, like we just saw, the same list, there's not much going on. Now, granted, there are more years in the 1990s than there are in the 2000s so far right now. I get all that. I understand that. But still, you would think the game is getting better. Players are getting better, right? Which is not the case. The game is changing. And I would argue that maybe the players, one, don't have the opportunity to shine like they used to. Two, the game is drastically changing where these guys can't really perform at the level that they were able to do back then. There's a lot more injuries. Guys can't stay healthy. And then you kind of see the owners push back. To me, the owners are pushing back with trying to make more money, trying to have, a longer season. And to me, this is hurting the product I think we see on the field. So I'm a little concerned. I know this call, or not this call, this podcast was just about to talk about the 2024 Green Bay Packer NFL draft class, and it's kind of gone into this. I don't know about where the NFL is going with this, because it seems like we're not going to look at this. I mean, look at this list. 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 2000, 01, 02, 03, 05, 07. Granted, you got drafted in 08. You're probably not going to be retiring anytime soon. But, I mean, we're in 2024. I mean, I would say the average NFL, let's look this up before I say some BS. The average NFL career is really low, right? It's not really high. Wow. It's 3.3 years. So you got some guys who were drafted in 08, their career's over. I was going to say something really low, but I just wanted to be clear. So, you're seeing guys play for 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 years. If you go over this particular list and you go by position, again, assuming this is accurate, which I tend to think it is, but you're seeing 3.3 years. It's lower for some other guys. Kickers and punters, 4.8. Quarterbacks, 4.4. The average quarterback. Offensive lineman, 3.6. Defensive lineman, 3.2. Linebackers, 2.9. Corners, 2.9. Tight ends, 2.8. Wide receivers, 2.8. And running backs, 2.57. So that tells me we're getting that same kind of average moving forward. If we even have a Hall of Famer who comes out every year, you're getting about 1.5 to 1 great Hall of Famer per year. And I think it's just going to get less and less as the game continues to change. And unfortunately, we suffer as fans because the product is going to drastically change. And this is why I believe I'm just so disgruntled in general about where football is going. And specifically bringing it back to the Green Bay Packers, where I do think there are some great evaluators of talent out there, and I just don't think Brian Gutekunst is one of those guys. And what bothers me is the Green Bay Packers organization is cheap. And I get it, we're small towns, Midwestern, but we're supposed to be the great Green Bay Packers. When you think of the NFL, you think of the Green Bay Packers first. And to me, they've just done a poor job in representing the greatest team in the world. And I just want to see them do better. And if Brian Gutekunst was doing better, I don't care who's in position. If he's doing a great job, let's go. But right now, I just don't think he's doing a good enough job. And I don't think there's a good chance if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy that he's got a chance to make a run to the Super Bowl. And if he even makes it to the Super Bowl, he just makes the Green Bay Packers look like idiots. If he just makes it to the Super Bowl before the end of his career, it's going to push back that conversation of what did you do with this dude's career? Now, granted, you weren't there. You were there scouting in 05, but you weren't there. You were there in 2018 when you're in a position to do something. It's going to say, hey, man, this guy won 2 MVPs underneath you. Why didn't you win or even make it to the Super Bowl? Why didn't you put talent around him? Now if Aaron Rodgers doesn't win a Super Bowl or even make it to another Super Bowl, or if he makes it to an NFC Championship game and loses, then it's going to kind of look like, what Brian did was the best he could do. Even when Aaron went to the Jets and he made it to the AFC Championship game, he ended up losing, same result, whatever. But I tend to disagree with that sentiment overall, but I won't be able to completely argue it when you have the history behind it, because I remember the details. This is why I say I make you a better fan, because you guys know how terrible those defenses were and how we lost games where Aaron Rodgers wasn't even on the field. And, botched kick from Bostic, and we can go on and on and on. But I don't think much of this draft, I don't think anyone can really tell, honestly. It's a crapshoot. It's stupid, honestly, to have this conversation. But I will say this, that the reason why I think there's so much hype around it is because it's fun. It's something fun to talk about. The season is super, super short. We don't get a lot of football. That's one of the reasons why I don't make a lot of podcasts during this time of the year, because, all you're doing is talking about drama for your mama or a bunch of speculation that has no relevancy whatsoever. So we won't know until these players get on the field how well these draft picks really, really are for the Green Bay Packers. Maybe we got some great all-time players here, but I mean, this is relatively boring, right? We got just some offensive linemen, a running back, but really we just need Jordan Love to produce, and that's kind of what I'm hoping for. So I hope I'm wrong, Jordan. I hope you prove me wrong. I doubt it because we just saw the results, right? The odds of Green Bay having 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks back-to-back. Oh, man, a second time from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. My goodness. It's not possible. So I think you guys as fans need to set the right expectations and realize last year was probably a fluky season. And really, was it a fluke? We were the 7th seed. The NFC was kind of trash. And then we beat the Dallas Cowboys. You heard that? Think about that. Guys were getting injured. Important guys were getting injured all over the league. The NFC was trash compared to the AFC. And we beat the Dallas Cowboys. Right? The Dallas Cowboys, whatever can go wrong, will go wrong. Them dudes are trash. Jerry Jones just holds them back. You guys, you know my stance on that. So, really, are we really that good? Huh? How many more teams have to embarrass us? We lost to the Giants last year, guys. Come on. So, I don't know. That's my opinion. I know I'm gonna get hate, but if you've been hearing and watching and listening all this long, you must really like my voice, or you're just trying to find something to get at me with. Either way, I appreciate you. Thank you for listening to Just Another Cheesehead podcast. That was a 2024 Green Bay Packers NFL Draft Class discussion, along with a lot of little other things sprinkled in. So, as always, hey, the real deal, Holyfield, this is what really matters. As Packer fans, we can come together. As football fans, we can come together, but we can disagree. But one thing I don't think we should disagree on, even though I'm sure I have some listeners out there, if you don't know the Lord Jesus Christ, you should get to know him. It will be the best decision you've ever made in your life. So ask the Lord to come into your life. He has saved you. Just receive it. Just pray to him. He'll show himself unto you. And as always, catch me on the next one. Peace, love, and hap. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Just Another Cheesehead podcast. I'm out.